bullion dealer. Just told me big news about silver. You know, I just got off the phone with one of the biggest bullion dealers in the country, and what he told me, it absolutely shocked me. It's not about the price going to $100 or even $200 an ounce. No. This is something far more significant. Something that could change everything for people like us who understand the value of real money. He said, and I quote, "We're seeing something we've never seen before in our 30 years of business. The floodgates are opening." But here's what's really interesting. It's not the billionaires buying up thousands of ounces that has him excited. It's something else entirely. Something that tells me we're at the beginning of something massive. And if you're holding silver right now, or thinking about starting, what I'm about to share with you in this video could be the most important information you hear all year. And welcome to Currency Archive. My friend, if this is your first time here with us at Currency Archive, I want you to do me a small favor. You see that subscribe button down there? Just like you'd keep your silver safe in a vault, I want you to lock in this channel by hitting that subscribe button, because we're building a community of folks who understand that real wealth isn't paper, it's metal. And before we dive in, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing our global family of silver stackers. He sat at his desk that morning, going through the usual routine of checking silver prices and reading the latest market updates. The coffee was still hot in his cup when his phone rang. It was one of the owners from Summit Metals, a well-known bullion dealer he had been in contact with for years. They exchanged pleasantries at first, talking about the recent volatility in the silver market. The price had been on an incredible run throughout 2025, climbing higher and higher until it briefly touched over $80 an ounce. Many stackers were excited, and some were nervous about what would come next. But then, the dealer said something that made him put down his coffee and lean forward in his chair. "We're seeing something unusual," the dealer told him. "Something we haven't seen in decades of being in this business." He listened carefully as the dealer continued. "New accounts are flooding in," the man explained. "Small purchases, everyday people. Folks who have never bought an ounce of silver in their lives are suddenly opening accounts and making their first orders." This wasn't about the big buyers. It wasn't about the wealthy investors dropping tens of thousands of dollars on massive silver bars. No, this was different. This was about regular people, everyday Americans, coming into the silver market for the first time. The dealer's voice carried a tone of genuine excitement. "These are new stackers," he said. "People who are just starting their journey, and they're coming in significant numbers." After hanging up the phone, he sat back in his chair and thought about what this really meant. Throughout 2024 and 2025, he had noticed more and more new faces appearing in the silver community. His own channel had attracted countless beginners, people asking basic questions about what to buy, where to buy it, and why silver mattered. But hearing it directly from a major dealer, that was confirmation. The tide was turning. He thought about all the times people celebrated when a billionaire like David Bateman bought thousands of ounces of silver. Those big purchases always made headlines. They were exciting to talk about. But were they really the most important thing happening in the silver market? He didn't think so anymore. What mattered more, he realized, was the collective power of thousands upon thousands of small buyers. Each person buying 10 ounces here, 20 ounces there, maybe just a few coins to start with. When added together, these small purchases represented something much bigger than any single large buyer could achieve. These new stackers were taking control of their financial future. They were saying no to the endless inflation that eroded their savings year after year. They were choosing sound money over paper currency that lost value by design. The Federal Reserve had a target inflation rate of 2% every year. 2% might not sound like much, but over time it destroyed wealth. It was designed to. And most people just accepted it as normal, as the way things had to be. But not these new silver buyers. They were waking up. They were taking action. He remembered something important that he always told new stackers who came to his channel. "Get educated first," he would say. "Don't buy a single ounce until you understand what you're buying and why you're buying it." Silver wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It wasn't about speculation or trying to time the market perfectly. It was about protection. It was about insurance. It was about holding real money that had maintained value for thousands of years. The volatility in silver's price could be scary for beginners. The price could shoot up one day and crash down the next. That was the nature of the market. But if someone understood why they were holding silver, if they understood it was a long-term strategy for preserving wealth, then the daily price movements wouldn't shake them. As he prepared to share this news with his audience, he felt genuinely hopeful. The best news about silver wasn't the rising price. The best news was that more people were protecting themselves. More people were joining the community. More people were choosing sound money. And that was something worth celebrating. The numbers told a fascinating story that most people weren't paying attention to. While the financial media obsessed over institutional investors and their massive silver positions, something far more powerful was happening quietly in the background. He had been studying the silver market for years, watching the patterns, observing the trends, and what he was witnessing now was unlike anything he had seen before. The year 2025 had been extraordinary for silver, with prices averaging up almost 150%. The metal had become the world's third largest asset at one point during the year, but statistics and charts only told part of the story. The real story was happening in living rooms across the country. It was happening in small towns and big cities. Regular families were making a decision that would change their financial futures forever. They were buying their first ounces of silver. These weren't wealthy collectors. These weren't investors with deep pockets looking for the next big trade. These were teachers, factory workers, retirees, small business owners, and young parents worried about the future. They were people who worked hard for their money and wanted to protect what they had earned. When someone bought their first silver coin, something clicked in their mind. They held that coin in their hand and felt its weight. They looked at the craftsmanship and the design. And they understood, perhaps for the first time, what real money actually felt like. Paper money was light, it crinkled, it wore out. It could be printed endlessly by central banks who seemed to create trillions of dollars out of thin air whenever they pleased. But silver? Silver was different. Silver was tangible. Silver was real. The dealer from Summit Metals had mentioned something else during their conversation that stuck with him. The new accounts weren't just buying once and disappearing. Many of them were coming back. They were making second purchases, third purchases. They were becoming consistent stackers. This was the behavior that mattered most. Anyone could buy silver once on a whim. But to keep buying, month after month, required conviction. It required understanding. It required belief in what silver represented. He thought about the approximately 25% of the silver market that consisted of physical coins, rounds, and bars. Some people looked at that number and dismissed it as too small to matter. After all, the majority of silver was used in industry or held in other forms like ETFs and futures contracts. But those people were missing the point entirely. That 25% represented millions of individuals who had taken physical possession of their wealth. They weren't relying on paper promises or digital entries in a database. They held the actual metal. And every single one of those holders had removed their silver from the available supply. When someone bought a silver coin and put it in their safe, that coin wasn't coming back to the market anytime soon. It was locked away. It was protected. It was saved for the future or for the next generation. Multiply that decision by millions of people, and suddenly that 25% became incredibly powerful. It represented a floor beneath the market. It represented real demand that couldn't be manipulated away with paper contracts or computer algorithms. The big institutional players could move prices in the short term with their massive trades. But the small stackers, the everyday people holding physical silver, they were the ones who would determine the long-term trajectory of the market. He had seen this dynamic play out before in different markets. When enough regular people made the same decision, when they voted with their wallets and refused to sell, they became an unstoppable force. Governments could print more currency, banks could create more credit, but nobody could print more silver. The metal existed in finite quantities. Every year, miners pulled a certain amount from the ground. Some of it went to industry, some went to investors, and some went into the hands of stackers who had no intention of ever selling. As more new buyers entered the market, as more people woke up to the reality of endless inflation and currency debasement, the available supply of physical silver would continue to shrink. The coins and bars would disappear into private hands, into safes and vaults and hiding places across the world. And when the supply finally became tight enough, when the paper markets could no longer pretend that unlimited silver existed, that's when the real price discovery would begin. That's when the stackers would be vindicated. Not because they got rich, but because they had protected themselves, because they had chosen wisely, because they had held real money when everyone else was holding promises. There was something brewing beneath the surface of the financial markets that most analysts completely missed. They were too busy watching central bank announcements and economic data releases to notice what ordinary people were doing with their savings. He had witnessed many market cycles over the years, bull runs and crashes, moments of euphoria followed by periods of despair. But this time felt fundamentally different. This wasn't just about price movements on a chart. This was about a shift in consciousness. People were tired of watching their purchasing power evaporate year after year, tired of being told that 2% inflation was acceptable and normal, tired of politicians and bankers making decisions that enriched the few at the expense of the many. The Federal Reserve called it a target inflation rate. They made it sound scientific, measured, controlled. But anyone who actually bought groceries or paid rent knew the truth. 2% was a lie. The real erosion of purchasing power was far worse. And even if it was only 2%, that meant the currency lost half its value every 35 years. That was theft by design. Slow, steady, relentless theft. But silver didn't participate in that game. Silver couldn't be created by central banks at the push of a button. Silver had to be mined from the earth, refined and minted. It took work. It took energy. It took resources. And because of that, silver maintained its value over time. The new stackers understood this instinctively, even if they couldn't articulate all the economic theory behind it. They knew something was wrong with the system. They felt it in their bones, and they were taking action. What made this moment in history so unique was the combination of factors all happening at once. Silver prices were surging, drawing attention to the metal. Information was spreading rapidly through social media and YouTube channels. People were educating each other, sharing knowledge, comparing experiences. The barriers to entry had never been lower. Someone could go online right now and order silver coins to be delivered to their door within days. They could compare prices across multiple dealers. They could read reviews and watch videos explaining exactly what to buy and why. 20 years ago, buying silver meant finding a local coin shop or navigating complicated mail order catalogs. The average person barely knew that silver coins existed for investment purposes. But now everyone with an internet connection could become a silver stacker. He thought about the different paths people took into precious metals. Some came because they were worried about economic collapse. Others came because they wanted to preserve their wealth for retirement. Some were motivated by distrust of the banking system. Others simply liked the idea of owning something beautiful and tangible. The reasons varied, but the action was the same. They bought silver, they held it. They became part of something larger than themselves. There were other ways to bet on silver's rise, of course. Exchange-traded funds offered exposure to silver prices without the hassle of storage. Futures contracts allowed traders to speculate with leverage. Mining stocks provided indirect exposure to silver with the potential for amplified gains. He even had a sponsor for this video, Argenta Silver, a mining company with the ticker AGF. The company had some impressive credentials. Billionaire mining tycoon Frank Giustra was a major shareholder, along with Argentinian businessman Eduardo Elstein. Together, they owned roughly a quarter of the company. Argenta's main project was the third largest undeveloped pure silver deposit in Argentina. The previous owners had spent an estimated 60 million Canadian dollars on exploration and development. Argenta had purchased the entire project for just $3.5 million. The company now had about $18 million in working capital and drilling operations underway. The stock had surged 188% in 2025, but had pulled back 34% from its peak. For those interested in the speculation side of silver, companies like Argenta represented a way to potentially amplify returns. The ticker was AGF, available on the OTC markets and through brokers like Interactive Brokers and Schwab. But he always came back to the same conclusion. Mining stocks were speculation. ETFs were paper promises. Futures contracts were for traders, not savers. Physical silver was different. Physical silver was the foundation. It was the insurance policy. It was the sound money that you could hold in your hand and know with absolute certainty that it was real. The new stackers needed to understand this distinction. They needed to know that owning physical silver meant being patient. It meant weathering volatility. It meant not panicking when prices dropped or getting too excited when prices spiked. Silver wasn't going to make anyone rich overnight. That wasn't the point. The point was protection. The point was stability. The point was opting out of a monetary system that was designed to fail in slow motion. When someone held a silver coin, they weren't just holding metal. They were holding thousands of years of monetary history. They were holding something that had been valued by every civilization that ever existed. They were holding real wealth that no government could inflate away. And now, for the first time in generations, millions of regular people were making that choice simultaneously. They were voting against fiat currency. They were voting for sound money. They were starting a quiet revolution that would reshape the financial landscape. The morning sun filtered through the window as he held a silver coin in his hand, turning it slowly between his fingers. This single ounce of metal represented something that most people spent their entire lives never understanding. It wasn't just an investment. It wasn't just a hedge. It was a declaration of independence from a system that had been rigged against ordinary people for over a century. He thought about all the new stackers who were just beginning their journey. Many of them had probably bought their first coins in the excitement of the recent price surge. They had watched silver climb past $80 an ounce and felt the rush of seeing their metal increase in value almost overnight. But what happened when the price fell? What happened during the inevitable corrections that came with every bull market? Would these new stackers panic and sell? Would they lose faith and give up? This was the critical test. This was where education made all the difference. The people who understood silver's true purpose would hold through the volatility. They would actually welcome the price dips as opportunities to buy more ounces at better prices. They would stack consistently, regardless of what the charts showed on any given day. But the people who came to silver looking for quick profits, who viewed it as just another speculation, they would get shaken out. They would sell at a loss and walk away bitter. telling everyone that silver was a bad investment. That's why he felt such a strong responsibility to educate. That's why he constantly emphasized the long-term perspective. Silver wasn't a trade, it was a lifestyle. It was a commitment to preserving wealth across years and decades, not days and weeks. He had seen so many people make the same mistakes over the years. They would buy at the top of a rally, watch the price crash, and then sell in despair right before the next surge began. They lacked the conviction that came from understanding. They lacked the patience that came from proper education. The volatility in silver markets was legendary. The metal could swing 10 or 15% in a single week. News events, economic reports, changes in industrial demand, movements in currency markets, all of these factors and more could send silver prices sharply higher or lower with little warning. Someone unprepared for this reality would have a very stressful experience as a silver holder. But someone who understood that volatility was simply the price of admission, who knew that short-term fluctuations meant nothing in the grand scheme, they would sleep peacefully at night. He wanted the new stackers to be in that second category. He wanted them to succeed. He wanted them to still be holding their silver 5 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe for the rest of their lives. Because that's when the real magic happened. That's when silver fulfilled its true purpose as a wealth preservation tool. Imagine someone who started stacking in 2001 when silver was around $4 an ounce. They bought consistently through the years, never selling, always adding more when they could afford it. They held through the spike to $50 in 2011. They held through the brutal bear market that followed. They held through the slow recovery, and now they held through this new bull market. That person had protected their wealth magnificently. They had opted out of the inflation game. They had sound money that retained its purchasing power while paper currency continuously lost value. But more than that, they had peace of mind. They had tangible wealth that didn't depend on the promises of banks or governments. They had independence. They had security. They had taken control of their financial destiny in a way that very few people ever did. This was the message he wanted to convey to everyone watching. Silver wasn't about getting rich. It was about staying stable in an unstable world. It was about protecting what you had earned. It was about having something real in a world increasingly dominated by digital abstractions and paper promises. The news from Summit Metals about the surge in new small buyers was encouraging precisely because it suggested more people were figuring this out. More people were choosing the path of sound money. More people were taking responsibility for their own financial security instead of trusting institutions that had repeatedly proven themselves untrustworthy. As he prepared to close out his thoughts, he felt genuinely optimistic about the future. Not because silver prices might go higher, though they very well might, but because a growing community of stackers represented a fundamental shift in how people thought about money and wealth. Every person who bought their first silver coin was someone who had woken up to reality. They had seen through the illusion of fiat currency. The silver community would continue to grow. More dealers would report increasing numbers of small accounts. More regular people would discover the power of holding physical precious metals. And slowly but surely, the collective action of millions of individuals would reshape the entire market. This was empowerment in its purest form. Nobody needed permission from authorities to buy silver. Nobody needed a license or special credentials. Anyone with a few dollars could start stacking. Anyone could become part of this movement towards sound money. He looked at his own silver stack, accumulated over many years through consistent purchasing. Some of those coins had been bought near market tops. Some had been bought near market bottoms. In the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that the silver existed. It was real. It was his, and it would protect his wealth for as long as he chose to hold it. That's what he wanted for all the new stackers joining the community. Not riches, not overnight success, but protection, stability, independence, the peace of mind that came from holding sound money in an increasingly unsound financial system. The journey was just beginning for many of these new buyers. There would be challenges ahead. Market volatility would test their resolve. Friends and family might question their decisions. Mainstream financial advisors would probably tell them they were crazy. But if they stuck with it, if they kept stacking through good times and bad, if they truly understood what they were doing and why, then they would look back years from now and recognize this moment as one of the best decisions they ever made. The floodgates were opening. The revolution was underway. And the best news of all was that it wasn't being led by billionaires or institutions or governments. It was being led by ordinary people making extraordinary choices about their financial futures. Welcome to the silver community. Welcome to sound money. Welcome to taking control. The journey of 1,000 ounces begins with a single coin. And judging by what he was hearing from dealers across the country, millions of people were taking that crucial first step.